All right, welcome to the Chapter 1 lecture. What we're going to talk about here is your sources of rights. Where do you get your rights from? How does the law originate? Now, most of you have probably taken a government course or some type of course which would make this information that you already know, but just a quick review of it so you can understand, and operationalize how the law works. Essentially, it comes down to this. If there's no law against it, a lot of people like to say, well, it's legal. Well, nothing is really legal. It's either there's a law against it making it illegal, or you can get away with it. So if there's if there's no law against it, you can do it. Like a lot of people have some myths about what you can and can't do in according to the law, like driving barefoot. Some people think you're not allowed to drive barefoot. But the legislature never got together and said, hey, let's write a law that says you can't drive barefoot. So cops are not out there looking for people, not wearing shoes, or I don't even know how you would find somebody not wearing shoes when they were driving. Pull them over and say, hey, let me see your shoes. There's just no law against that. It's a common misperception. Some people think that it's illegal to count cards at the casino. It's not illegal to count cards at the casino. In fact, if you're good at it, you can make a lot of money at it. Only problem with that is the casinos, they don't like to lose money. They don't pay for those big, beautiful buildings with people who take money from the casino. So with that said, the casinos do reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. If they catch you counting cards and winning, if you count cards and lose, they don't care. But if they catch you counting cards and you're winning and taking money from them, what could end up happening is they could ask you to leave. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as the person who's asked to leave does leave. If they don't, that actually becomes a crime. There's statutes that have been written that say trespassing. You're told to leave. Or in Louisiana, they call that particular one remaining after forbidden. So if that person doesn't leave, they can be arrested. But they won't be arrested for counting cards. They would be arrested for failing to leave the premises. So anyway, that's just kind of a breakdown. But what I want you to understand is if it's not written in the law and it's not prescribed in the elements of the offense, the elements of the offense describing what you can and cannot do, it's not against the law. And it has to be detailed. We have to, a common person should be able to read the law and know, what's legal and what's not legal. For instance, the statute for running a red light, I believe that's in Louisiana, that's Title 232 maybe, don't quote me on that. But you think, oh, it just says run a red light. Well, it doesn't work that way. You have to specifically say what is running a red light, because there can be some confusion on that. In fact, I had some students several semesters ago complain to me that, hey, they were getting tickets for running a red light, and they didn't think they ran the red light. So I started inquiring about it, and it turns out the students were right. They were not running a red light according to the statute. The police officers writing the tickets did know the law. So, made a few phone calls and got that taken care of. So, our goals for the course, moving on, we want to respect the rights of all people. We want to subscribe to the rule of law, which requires, that the law is applicable to everyone. I'll give you a caveat to that. That doesn't always happen in the real world. Everybody says, oh, well, if a police officer pulls over their mother, is they really going to give their mother a ticket? Probably not. Or if it's somebody who's politically connected. We'd like to say it applies to everyone equally, but it's not. But that's we'll say a utopian goal that we're looking forward to. We want to increase the reputation of the criminal justice system by improving the accountability and professionalism of police officers and the public, by knowing the law on both sides. People should know what's against the law, what's not against the law. Speeding's pretty easy. If the sign says 55, you're supposed to go 55 or less and remain within the limits of the law. By doing all this, I think we can improve public safety. All right, we do have a dual court system. So the head court in charge, the United States Supreme Court, if they make a decision, everybody's got to listen to it. If the state of Louisiana makes a decision, the state Supreme Court, everybody in Louisiana has to listen to it, but not Texas. They can do whatever they wish. So we have a federal system and a state system. You should have taken that in a different class, so I'm not going to beat that one to death. Although when a decision is made, especially if it's something that's not been decided before, like there's always new phenomenon presenting itself. Like in the age of computers, when computers first came out and the internet first came out, the courts didn't know what to do with it. They said, oh, if you send an email, it just goes out into the public and everybody can have it, so there's no protection there. Since then, we do everything via secure, electronic communications. So therefore, you now have constitutional rights. In fact, most of us have a cell phone, and the cell phone is actually a computer, and that computer is now protected, and the police are not allowed to get into that without either your consent or a warrant. So. Anyway, when those decisions are made about computerized devices, it gives a set of rules that sets a precedent for future situations that are similarly circumstanced, and we have to abide by that. In Miranda v. Arizona in 1966, the Supreme Court said, you know what? I think all you officers should remind people that they have constitutional rights, the right to remain silent, and so forth. And whenever someone's in custodial interrogation, once they're in custody, and police want to ask them questions that tend to incriminate, they have to advise of certain rights. And even Louisiana went a step further, because Louisiana has a constitution in addition to the federal government. Louisiana said not only must you advise of Miranda rights when there is when you're asking questions and they're in custody, but if anybody gets arrested, even if you don't want to ask questions, Miranda rights must still be advised in the state of Louisiana. Everybody that gets arrested. It creates some confusion, because you have the federal side and you have the state side. If the FBI comes in and wants to arrest somebody for, we'll say, murder of a male person in the performance of their duties, that's a federal crime. Well, Louisiana has a couple of laws against murder as well, so that would actually be a violation of federal law and a violation of state law. If the feds want to come in and interrogate somebody about that murder, as long as they don't place them in custody, and they're going to be free to go, then that's not custodial interrogation. It is an interrogation, but it's not in custody, so therefore they don't have to issue the Miranda rights. We're in the state of Louisiana. If you're going to question a suspect, you're going to have to give the Miranda rights. And I always, when I train police officers in Louisiana, I always advise, when it's always advisable, it's always best when you're going to ask somebody questions about a crime, give them their Miranda rights, make sure they understand them, get a valid waiver, and then go ahead and ask the questions. Okay. Make sure we cover everything here. So I'm not going to have you read a case or a bunch of cases or memorize a bunch of cases, because we write them down for a reason. You can look them up and find what it is. Some cases are so important that you even use it to describe what you're doing. Police officers commonly refer to a stop and frisk as a Terry stop, because in Terry v. Ohio, the U.S. Supreme Court said, yeah, you can stop people, pat them down if you have a reason to believe that they might be armed and reasons to believe that they might have committed a crime, and that's okay, as long as you have reasonable suspicion. That was when that's a major case, and so they call it a Terry stop. Just like Mirandized. When someone gets Mirandized, they call it Miranda because of the case of Ernesto Miranda versus the state of Arizona. So, the case actually becomes a verb, but you're not going to see on the test any questions requiring you to memorize case law. I honestly think it's a waste of time, and that's why we write things down. That's why we can look it up on the internet. Although to get an understanding of how the Supreme Court works and how they think, and look at any U.S. Supreme Court decision and see the main opinion, the concurring opinions, the dissents, and just get an idea on how it works, because one or two changes in the U.S. Supreme Court justices, and next thing you know, we could get rid of the death penalty. We could get rid of abortion. We could get rid of the death penalty and bring it back, which has happened in the past. So, it just comes down to what the Supreme Court justices decide. All right. The places we get our rights, we get them from the constitutions. We have the federal constitution, we have the state constitution, and then we have case law. Let's say a police officer searches somebody's house without a warrant. Well, they can do that, but they need to have a good reason, or a reason that's been accepted, where case law has said it's okay to do that. And I'm not going to try to quote the exact case on it, but the Supreme Court has supported police officers searching a house without a warrant under what's called exigent circumstances. In an exigent circumstance, maybe the police knock on the door because they're getting they got a domestic violence call and they hear someone inside screaming. Well, if you wait on a warrant to go in to try to stop the crime in progress, somebody's going to get hurt or killed. So in an exigent circumstance like that, the police can make entry, search for that victim, and stop the crime in progress without getting a warrant. But once everything's calmed down, if they want to continue a search of the residence, they're going to have to get a warrant or get consent from somebody who's lawfully allowed to give consent, voluntarily, of course. So those are like case law that sets the rules for that. And again, local courts can make case law, and then if the one side doesn't like it, they'll take it up the chain of command. They'll go to the appellate court and all the way to possibly all the way to the Louisiana Supreme Court, and then go to the federal side and all the way to the federal Supreme Court. So those are some of your sources of rights. And again, if you look at the PowerPoints that go along with each chapter, you can kind of see this. I'm not gonna sit up here and read the PowerPoints to you. Okay. When laws are passed by the legislature. Somebody looks at something and says, "Hey, this should be illegal. Let's fix it." And I think there's some pretty weird laws out there. We used to have a law in the books called theft of crawfish and theft of alligators. Well, they finally got rid of those, and they just said theft of anything is theft. They didn't really need specifics to that. But they also have a law that says no bear wrestling. Now, I don't know who came up with that law, but apparently there was a problem with bear wrestling. We have a weird law in the books that says that it's illegal for a person to pretend to be your spouse and have sex. And I'm trying to figure out the inspiration for that law, and the only thing I can come up with is maybe a congressman came home one day and found his wife with somebody else, and she said, "Oh, I thought it was you." And he says, "Well, I'll fix that, you never pretend to be me again, and if you do, you'll get arrested." I don't know. Maybe it's something inspired that law and it was written down. So that's how our legislature passes a law and says it, and once they do that and says it's illegal, then it's illegal and you can't do it anymore. Not all laws are just. There was some laws on the books that allowed segregation. They required people to sit on a certain part of the bus, and technically violating that statute could result in criminal penalties, and it did. And it took some heroes in our society to choose, to break those laws and move forward. There were laws requiring that said it was okay to own human beings, and so slavery laws were legal, at least under our system, for a long time. So again, let's not confuse legality with morality, because not all laws are moral. Moving on. We need to understand that even if a law is passed, there's the right of judicial review. Okay, the right of judicial review is for the courts to look at a law and say, that ain't going to fly. It's unconstitutional. So they can throw a law out immediately. There's some laws on our books today in Louisiana that you can look up and say, oh, that's a cool law, or that's an interesting law. I wonder if anybody ever gets arrested for that. Well, the answer should be no. For instance, it's a rape of whether you agree with it or not, rape of a child under 12 in the state of Louisiana is punishable by death according to our laws. And I think it was in 2007 the United States Supreme Court said no. That's a cruel and unusual punishment. The punishment is too excessive for the crime. Whether you agree with it or not, that's a personal choice or personal decision. I personally don't have a problem with execution of a child rapist, but that's not up for me to decide. The U.S. Supreme Court said it was cruel and unusual, so even though that law is on the books, even today, it's not enforceable because of the right of judicial review. Another law that's on the books, I think it was written maybe in the 60s, is called criminal defamation. Louisiana Revised Statute 1447 basically says if you talk bad about somebody, even write a bad Yelp review, that is a crime punishable by, I think, up to 6 months in jail. I think if you would have taken that law and said, let's write a law and look this one up yourself, Title 1447. All you got to do is go to the Louisiana Legislature website and click laws. Look up 1447 criminal defamation and think, the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Let's write a law that just totally throws that out the window. And that's basically what the law says. So therefore, the courts have held that law is unenforceable because it's unconstitutional. Even though some police departments still try to enforce it. It's a lack of knowledge, I'll say. I believe it was Sheriff Larpenter a few years ago. I don't remember what year, maybe 2017. Decided to use that law to go after someone who's talking bad about him on Facebook. And he had to be reminded by the courts, and he did appeal it, but the courts, shot it down and ended up having to pay an undisclosed amount of money to someone that he went after. So he got search warrants for homes, Facebook, and AT&T to enforce that law, and that he knew or should have known that that law was unenforceable due to the right of judicial review. Because look, you pass a law that says, hey, that marriage is defined between one man and one woman, and therefore it's illegal for two females to marry, two males to marry. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court has already said you can't do that. So that would be another example of an unconstitutional law. We might even talk, maybe the legislature just loses their minds and goes straight racist on us and says, hey, let's bring slavery back. Well, that one's going to get shot down too. Just because a law is passed, even if it's still on the books, doesn't mean that it's actually enforceable. In fact, not only must law enforcement know what laws are enforceable, or know what laws are on the books, they must know that that some laws can actually be unenforceable based on a court decision. All right, then that's going to wrap up Chapter 2. I look forward to talking to you in Chapter 3. So if you have any questions, again, send me an email.